the next part of this show is the scandal of the Al Jazeera documentary that I've been watching over and over again. There's loads of stuff in it. I'd watched the first three, and then I just got a link saying, "Hey, here's number 4," and nobody had even flagged up number 4. And that came out on Friday, episode 4, which is about 20 minutes long. I've got an edited version of it, very short, sort of 2, 3 or 4 minute edited version, so people could see what was happening in episode 4. And then I'm going to speak to 2 of the people who are involved in that episode and have got lots to say about this real scandal of hacking that you'll see in this video.
And I just noticed that there's something not quite right about the email account.
Stephen Downes is the editor of Inside Croydon, an online news site that investigates the town's local government, Croydon Council.
Turned to my son and said, "Yeah, can you turn the TV down? I think I've been hacked." I couldn't actually get into my emails. I was locked out of my Inside Croydon email account.
Unable to check his emails, he turns to Twitter.
And then the tweet came through as well. A badly drafted tweet. It just basically said to the 12,000, 13,000 followers that we had at the time that councillors Stephen Mann, Robert Canning and Andrew Pelling had been acting as sources to Inside Croydon. I was horrified when I saw that. I was sick to my stomach.
Labour's London office ultimately informs Fraser that...
Broadly speaking, I think the hacked information can be shared, as long as this is being used to inform a disciplinary investigation.
Bannister passes the dossier of hacked emails to Hamida Ali, the leader of the Labour group in Croydon Council. She also passes it to Steve Reid, the local MP, and now Labour's opposition Minister for Justice.
They've emailed Steve Reid, who's a member of Keir Starmer's shadow cabinet. I mean, Steve Reid is a shadow justice minister. He must have some understanding, surely, of what the right thing to do is under the law. And this isn't it.
The Labour files contains a complaint by Clive Fraser against David White, a supporter of former leader Jeremy Corbyn. The MP Steve Reid, who is close to Labour's leader Keir Starmer, asks the London Regional Office to forward the complaint to the party's senior official, General Secretary David Evans.
You've just shown me this, in which Steve Reid, David Evans, has shown particular interest in David White. Now, David White has been in the Labour Party his entire life. He'd served the party diligently and exhaustively in various offices within Croydon Central constituency Labour Party.
David Evans passes the file on White to the Executive Director of Legal Affairs, Alex Barris-Curtis.
Can you ask whomever to look at David White, Croydon? I'm getting a lot of incoming on it, for reasons I can explain later.
I mean, there's an agenda going on here. There's a witch hunt going on here.
They were concerned about any Labour Party member who was trying to open up what was happening in the party, the lack of democracy, the purge, as I would call it, of members who on the left of the party or in some way don't fit in with the image that Keir Starmer wants for the Labour Party members.
White was expelled from the party, accused of being an anti-Semite.
Joining us is Stephen Downes, the editor of Inside Croydon, who you saw quite often on that clip. And
rather too much, I'd say, Crispin.
I thought he was fantastic. And David White as well, who's been on the show before. We talked about your expulsion before, David, but we hadn't had that information. Stephen, can I just talk to you first? Because why is Inside Croydon so unliked by the Labour Party in Croydon?
Well, it's not just the Labour Party that doesn't like us. without wishing to echo the Millwall supporters that no one likes us and we don't care. I mean, I had a comment this week on the site from one of our readers from the deep south of the borough, who is still smarting at the fact that he sees Inside Croydon as helping to get Labour to win control of the council in 2014, which I think we did. No, I mean, I established the site in 2010 because for the first time in my entire life, I found myself living in a Tory-run city with Tory councillors under a Tory council with a Tory MP and a Tory government. And I'd never had that full whammy before. And there's a passage in one of Tony Benn's many books about taking control of the media. And one of the things that the interweb has allowed us to do is I don't need to pay for newsprint. I don't need to print the papers. I don't need to get them distributed. I have in my hands quite a capable tool for covering news. And our local news coverage in this part of South London was pretty abysmal. I was reading most of the really interesting stories about how badly managed Croydon Council was. I was reading in Private Eye, not in the local papers. So I just sort of took that on, and the thing snowballed. And at first, I was embraced by the local Labour Party. I was the best thing they'd seen for a very long time, because the local press were essentially conservative with a small c. And I was able to actually report things which, as far as I could see, were newsworthy and worthy of being exposed in terms of the way they were being run. And it was only after they got elected in 2014 that Tony Newman, the council leader, and others started to keep us very much at arm's length. And I discovered, thanks to the colleagues at Al Jazeera, as they dug out the files, Labour have been trying to gag and close down Inside Croydon as a news site since 2016. Wow. And much of that stems from the personal animus of Steve Reid, the MP in Croydon North, who has twice now threatened to sue us, twice now failed to even come up with a solicitor's letter, largely because he realises that our ultimate defence is the truth. And we've been able to report about the way in which Steve Reid has conducted himself before and since he's been an MP, with basically good journalism, I would say, without wishing to sound too arrogant. But that's what I do. That's what I've always done throughout my paid career, working as a journalist.
Now, we don't know who hacked you, but that information was passed on to Labour councillors in Croydon, and also up to the General Secretary and across to the Complaints Department. What was it about your website at that particular time? Why do you think why would they have tried to take your website down at that point, hack it?
It's a fairly fluid situation. The programme coming out on Friday has actually brought forward a couple of other witnesses who can narrow down even more the prime suspects. We can't say with any certainty who conducted the hack. What we do know is it wasn't just a casual thing. We do know that the passwords were obtained on the dark web, and it was an organised and a coordinated hack attack. And it was done on commission, I would suggest, because the three, they basically pillaged through a 10-year-old email account. And they were looking initially for just three names. And those were the three names that they put out there, the three councillors who were then persecuted and run out, and chased out of the party. in some cases. So this was all quite deliberate and quite planned and quite well organised. This was not just a couple of amateur kids doing this. And they took those files and they cherry-picked what they thought would be the best bits and presented those on a plate to Labour Party officials, who proceeded to do exactly the wrong thing under the law. And yeah, I mean, we know, because there have been little dribbles of leaks since involving other cases, that they're sitting on 77 megabytes of data there, including emails that were sent to me by the Labour leader of the council, Steve Reid himself, various other Labour figures, but they didn't choose to use or mention any of those because it didn't suit their purpose. And their purpose was to pursue and persecute one or two particular individuals that officials within the Labour Party in Croydon had some sort of personal animus to or grudge about.
And David Evans, it comes up in the documentary as we saw at the end, targeting David White. We'll speak to in a sec. But what's David Evans? Does he have a connection, I think, with Croydon? Can you tell us how David Evans has a local interest in your area?
Yeah, just a bit. I wrote about this yesterday, so if anyone wants to read it at length, there's a piece at the top of the site at the moment on insidecroydon.com. David Evans is notorious because in 1997, 2001, he worked within the Tony Blair team to get the Labour elected. He was known for his campaign expertise, let's put it that way. After he left working for the Labour Party under Blair, Evans established a company, a lobbying and PR company, which is based in central Croydon, called the Campaign Company. That does various work for various public bodies. And in 2013, 2014, Evans worked very closely with Croydon Labour on their campaign so that they would win back control of the council here from the Conservatives. Evans has some personal connections within the leadership, or the erstwhile leadership of Croydon Labour. He shares a child with a woman called Alison Butler, who was the deputy leader of the Labour group on the council and a long-standing councillor. After Labour got elected at Croydon Council in 2014, the Campaign Company, David Evans's company, benefited by at least £200,000 worth of council contracts that were shuffled their way by the grateful leadership of the party. So very, very close. A number of Croydon councillors and senior figures within Croydon Labour have worked for the Campaign Company down the years. We think that one of the people implicated in the hack is also a former employee of the Campaign Company.
Wow, that's pretty. It's got strong links with Croydon then. And David White, thanks for coming on. David Evans, what seems to take a real interest in you and your case. Why do you think that is?
Right. Well, I was quite surprised to see the Al Jazeera papers and to see that David Evans was involved. Also, Alex Barros Curtis. He's not very well known, but he's the executive director of legal affairs at the Labour Party, and he's known as Starmer's enforcer, I believe. And he was also involved in the Al Jazeera programme, number four. There's an email from Alex Barros Curtis to a colleague in the governance and legal unit saying, can you look at David White? Was stuff submitted originally through me, I think, from Steve Reid. That's Steve Reid MP for Croydon North. Now, specifically on David Evans, as Stephen has mentioned, David Evans has lots of links with Croydon. Some years ago, he was a Croydon councillor, so he knows me a bit. And I think that some of the reasons that they targeted me, as well obviously as hundreds of other people all over the country, but in particular in Croydon, I moved a motion of no confidence in Keir Starmer as leader of the party and David Evans as General Secretary in Croydon Central CLP in early 2021. I was also one of those involved in trying to get an independent inquiry into the removal of a left-wing candidate in a by-election in Croydon. And we eventually got that independent inquiry against the wishes of Tony Newman, the then leader of the council, and against the wishes of London Region Labour Party. And also, finally, I was a delegate to the 2021 Labour Party conference. And as we know, the people in the Labour Party admin wanted that year and also this year to remove people just a day or two before the conference who they thought were going to be supporting left-wing motions, and in the case of 2021 the actual ratification of David Evans as General Secretary. So I think the combination of all those reasons meant that David Evans and the other senior people seem to have taken an interest in my case.
And what was remarkable is that they didn't mention any anti-Semitism in their discussions about you at all, but you were expelled for anti-Semitism. It says in the documentary. So it seems to imply to me that they were looking for any way to get rid of you, and they found anti-Semitism in a kind of cynical way. It looks very cynical from that, doesn't it?
I think that's exactly right. The thing that they were looking at that was revealed by the Al Jazeera papers was my corresponding with Stephen Downes, editor of Inside Croydon, about a local matter, the independent investigation into the removal of the candidate, which I mentioned, but they obviously concluded that that was basically in the public domain, so they couldn't really sustain a complaint against me on the grounds of speaking to a journalist about that. So I think, as you rightly say, Crispin, they were looking for other things. We know from one of the Al Jazeera episodes that Labour Party staff were instructed to look under certain key words about people that the party officials wanted to investigate. And one of the key words was Palestine. So they trawled through people's social media looking for anything they said about Palestine. And so I and lots of other people, obviously, in the party were pinpointed that way. And eventually, as you say, they brought the case against me on the grounds of alleged anti-Semitism.
Yeah. Now, Stephen, but just to finish, what do you think should happen now? Do you think there should be a police investigation into this? Where do you think this should go? Because this is against the law, isn't it? What's happened here?
Well, we're not going to get a call for a police investigation for the Shadow Justice Minister, are we? I mean, yes, there should be, but as I've discovered in terms of filing my police reports at the time of the hack and one or two other instances, the Met Police are very reluctant to get involved in all this. It's all very, very complicated. It's all far too complicated for them to actually investigate. And yet it's a fairly straightforward process. You know, the question is, do you, Steve Reed, have these files? Have you, Steve Reed, put these files to the police so that they can actually try and track down where the source of them? And yeah, the answer to the second question is no. And that, on the face of it, is a criminal offence.
Yeah, and the same for David Evans as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it goes right to the top of the Labour Party, and their approach to upholding the law can be best described as casual.